Hi all, I wanted to show you the basics of the true pano head for being able to do panoramic photos where all the images will stitch together, and also for being able to do the full 360 and also the spherical kind of panoramics as well. So this is the head for being able to do the true panoramics. It's made to be able to mount onto a tripod like so. It's able to rotate all the way around. It has click stops to help you be able to keep track of where you are as you're rotating on the tripod head. It has the mount for the camera. Normally when you mount the camera on here, it will be mounted like so, mounted to the 0 position, if you can see it on the scale here, with the camera mounted onto here facing this direction so that the center of the lens is lined up with the center of the rotation point, and also the nodal point of the lens would be lined up with that center point as well. So what will happen is as the camera rotates around, you won't see any of the parallax problems that you would if you were just hand holding or just placing it directly onto a tripod. Okay, so just a second and I'll show you how the camera mounts on there and how we calibrate it as well. If you're using a tripod for doing panoramics, the best option is to have a tripod that has a bubble level mount on the surface below where the tripod head mounts onto it. That way when the head rotates around, you know it's always going to be perfectly level. My tripod doesn't have that, so I have to kind of work with it a little bit to make sure that it is perfectly level. It does have a bubble level that is on the top head, so I can use this to kind of help me be able to determine when I've got the head perfectly level. So when I place it in there and make sure the bubble level is straight, and as I rotate it, if it doesn't remain straight, that means that maybe I need to readjust my legs a little bit to be able to get it where it's going to be perfectly centered all the way around as I'm rotating it around on it here. So in this case, I'm going to move one of my legs up just a little and recenter. Try rotating until I get it pretty dead on here. Okay, so it looks pretty good. So once it's really straight and level all the way around, then you can mount your camera on and be able to do your series of photos to be able to get the 180 degree or 360 degree. Now this is set up for being able to do it with your camera taking horizontal pictures, which means that you end up with really narrow photos, really long and narrow photos on it there. You could even take and be able to rotate the mount so that you could be able to take your photos where they are to the side like this, but it's really difficult again, and sometimes what you'll run into is some real issues with parallax because the lens is so far out away from the center of rotation on it here. Okay, so generally speaking, if you're using a tripod, you probably are better off sticking with the level and straight like this and rotating in a horizontal fashion like that, unless you're going to use the other head for being able to help with the panoramics. So here's the pano head attached to the tripod. It's set up, it has its own bubble level for making sure it's nice and level as it rotates around. It has degrees showing its rotation as we move the head around this direction for being able to take the series of photos with it. We can actually go a full 360. The camera is going to mount onto here and have the lens pointed this way, and then we're going to level it up to get it centered properly for taking the photos here. Once the camera is mounted to the head here, the first thing we want to do is point it straight down so that we can center up the center of the rotation around the camera lens here. So we look through the viewfinder on the back here until we get it completely centered so that it's right dead center and we're all perfectly level for being able to work with that. The next thing is going to be determining where the nodal point of the lens is for setting up the camera. So the next thing I had to do was to find the nodal point of the lens to make sure that when the lens rotates around, that the images that it's capturing don't have a parallax problem. The parallax problem is basically when you line up things here and you move the camera, things start going back and forth like this, and it causes a lot of problems trying to stitch things that have objects that are close up and things that are further away in the picture. And so when you try to stitch them, it'll have problems and things won't line up properly. So finding the nodal point for this helps us be able to make sure that those things that are close will line up with the things in the back as we rotate the camera around and take those photos. So I've done that already and moved it so that the nodal point of the lens is located right around here. It really depends on which lens that you're using as to where that nodal point is going to be on it there. But basically it's a point where as you rotate this around, objects near and objects far stay in the same place and don't start overlapping and moving back and forth like that when we're taking the photo. So I'm really kind of set up for being able to do the panoramic picture now. So on this case, what I'm going to do is set the camera to the 0 position on the dial here. With this lens, I'm using a 10mm lens, which is pretty wide angle. So it should be able to capture a pretty wide angle on it. But as I take my series of photos, I want to make sure that I have plenty of overlap between the images so that the software can see things and be able to line them together and make sure everything stitches properly on here. In this case, I'm doing about 45 degrees per shot, and that way I'll have enough, close to a 50% overlap between the pictures, and it'll be really easy for Photoshop or Bridge or raw processor to be able to stitch those things together. So I'm going to go ahead and take a series of photos. I have it set up currently for doing as raw file and also for doing it as HDR. So if I wanted to do it as an HDR, I could. I need to change my exposure just a little because I am probably, well, it's not too bad. It's a little slow, but we'll see what we can do here. So I'm just going to start here and I'm going to move it around 45 degrees and we'll do a series of photos to see if I can do at least 180 degree kind of photo. So maybe I'll start over in the corner over here and then I'll come around to the desk for being able to do it. Again, I want to make sure my camera and my adapter is zeroed out. Okay, I'll go ahead and turn on my view here so I can see the exposure and adjust it as needed. So, and we'll just start. So I am currently at 270, so we'll take one here. There's those 3. We're going to rotate around. 3. We'll do another series. Rotate on around. 2, 3. And then we'll rotate around. 2, 3. And we'll do another 3. 1, 2, 3. And another set. And then one more. We'll come around. We're past 180 degrees now, but we'll go ahead and take another one. There we go. All right, so we should be able to now take and be able to stitch those pictures together to be able to create our panoramic.